This is Ringler Radio, where you get all the latest news and information about structured settlements from Ringler Associates, the first name in structured settlements, helping injured people and their families since 1975. Ringler Radio is made possible in part by Allstate, American General, John Hancock, Liberty Mutual, MetLife, Mutual of Omaha, New York Life, Pacific Life, and Prudential. Now join Ringler Radio host Larry Cohen.
Well, hello and welcome to Ringler Radio, everyone. I'm Larry Cohen, the head of Ringler Associates Northeast Operations, and we're certainly glad you could join us again today. Well, recently a federal court jury awarded a woman and her husband $8 million in a case of sudden unintended acceleration that left Cheryl Bullock severely and permanently injured after a September 2011 crash. Ms. Bullock was traveling with her 5-year-old daughter when her 2004 Volkswagen Passat suddenly accelerated out of her control, causing the vehicle to leave the road and overturn. The lawsuit that was filed alleged Volkswagen Group of America and Honeywell International were aware of a defect in the vehicle's turbocharger that could lead to sudden acceleration problems. So today on Ringler Radio, we have an interesting show. We're going to be taking a look inside the case and also look at some other sudden acceleration cases. And we'll talk about what the car industry is doing to try to rectify these issues and better notify consumers. And joining me today as my co-host is my Ringler colleague and friend Keith Christie from Ringler's Birmingham and Mobile, Alabama offices. Keith has 30 years of experience in insurance and structured settlements, and he's been a real leader in our industry. Welcome along, Keith, and thanks for joining me as my co-host.
I appreciate being here, Mike. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate.
And joining us today as our special guest is Michael Andrews from the Beasley Allen law firm in Montgomery, Alabama. Mike joined Beasley in 1998, working in the products liability section. He's handled several cases against aircraft manufacturers, light and heavy trucks, automobiles, agricultural and construction equipment, really the entire gamut. Mike also has a particular passion for working on behalf of injured children. So with that, I want to say welcome, Mike. Great to have you here on Ringler Radio.
And great. Good morning. Thank you for having me back and having the opportunity to discuss this very important case.
Well, terrific, Mike. Well, Mike, why don't you give us an overview of the Bullock sudden acceleration case and what really happened mechanically caused this tragedy?
Well, unlike a lot of the sudden acceleration cases that we've heard of in the past, this actually centers around a little bit of a different type defect. Frequently, sudden acceleration cases stem from a computer glitch or a fly-by-wire type situation. And in those cases, Toyota has more often than not blamed the driver for misapplication of the gas pedal rather than the brake. But in this case, the vehicle was a turbo diesel, and it's a little bit different setup in what caused the acceleration and the uncontrolled situation with the car. The turbocharger in this car and any other car works to increase the amount of air that is forced into the intake of the car. And by doing that, automakers can more or less squeeze out more power from a little bit smaller engine. The rotating components in a turbocharger have to be lubricated, just like any other parts of an engine that are moving. And they do that by using some of the pressurized engine oil that is already in the motor. Well, because this engine was a diesel, it will burn virtually any fuel. Diesel is an unrefined version of gasoline. It's only slightly more refined than just pure engine oil. So if other fuels are introduced into the diesel engine, it can burn those. In this case, a leaky seal inside the turbocharger allowed this pressurized engine oil, which is supposed to be there to lubricate the turbo component, to leak into the air path, forced into the engine, and created a new secondary unregulated fuel source for this engine. So in effect, our driver has the accelerator, like you do in any other car, but it's also got a steady flow of engine oil now being introduced into the engine through the turbocharger, which there is no accelerator pedal. There's no control for that. And so as she's driving, the car begins to accelerate over time.
Well, Mike, let me ask you, Miss Bullock was permanently disabled because of this preventable tragedy. Can you describe her injuries to us?
Yeah, her injuries were very severe. In fact, I've handled a number of cases in which people that were not injured as severely did not make it. She literally was injured from head to toe. She suffered severe injuries to her optic nerve. She had a closed head injury. She broke several cervical vertebrae in her neck, a number of her ribs, lacerated several internal organs as a result of wearing her seatbelt in the crash. Both knees severely injured, and interestingly, one of her more serious injuries, orthopedic injuries, gave us sort of a telltale of the position of her foot at the time of the crash, which later became to be a real issue in the case. In most cases, automakers blame the driver. And in cases in which the driver is killed, there's no one there to stand up for themselves. Thankfully, Miss Bullock survived this crash, and she was telling us that her car was accelerating, that she was unable to bring it to a stop, and that she was pushing the brake pedal. Well, her right ankle had an injury that orthopedists refer to as an aviator's fracture. They call it that because in the old days when pilots would fly the stick and rudder aircraft, if they crashed while their feet were on the rudder pedals, it caused a very unique break pattern, a breakage, a fracture in their ankle bone. And they just characteristically refer to that as an aviator's break. Well, Miss Bullock had the very same break, and her orthopedist testified that, yes, that's consistent with her foot being on the brake pedal at the time of the crash. And so some of her injuries, told us what she was doing and how she was trying to stop the car at the time of the crash.
Well, that's interesting, Mike. You also alleged in the lawsuit that Volkswagen and Honeywell International were aware of the defects. Tell us about that.
That's true. Honeywell's Involvement, a company named Garrett Turbo Technologies, has been around for a number of years. Honeywell purchased that company, and they manufactured the turbo in this case. Part of the discovery in the case, and part of what we were able to show the jury at the time of the trial, were engineering documents that showed that during testing, Honeywell was aware of leaks that developed in this particular seal design. That they found that it leaked on passenger car applications, it leaked on heavy trucks, it leaked on applications such as agricultural tractors, and they simulate different loading conditions, different motoring conditions, and in a number of those, Honeywell knew several years before our car was manufactured that this design leaks. Now, interestingly, these papers also discussed alternative designs, different manufacturing techniques, different designs that Honeywell tested that did not leak. But unfortunately, those were not incorporated in our car.
Well, Mike, from Toyota to Volkswagen, we've seen so many unintended acceleration cases in the news. Why is that? And what are these car giants manufacturers missing when they put together these vehicles?
Yeah, and one thing you have to look at is that there are, again, a number of reasons why cars can accelerate and become uncontrollable. And so when you look for the common thread, that becomes the fact that the standards that automakers have to comply with are so minimal that a lot of defects are just simply going unnoticed. They're not being picked up. And standards which cars do meet, again, are so very minimal that a car can pass a number of standards and still be defective. An example would be every Bronco 2, every Pinto, every Ford Explorer with Wilderness tires, every GM right now with the defective ignitions. All of those cars passed the minimal highway safety standards that we have in the U.S. They're still defective. And so what has to happen is manufacturers need to look beyond just the bare minimum and realize that these autos are used in everyday driving. They're used in the world where crashes happen, and they need to implement and follow more stringent guidelines.
Well, Mike, that's interesting. I was going to ask you that. What has to happen with the industry, the auto industry, to help prevent tragedies? Does the government have to pass more stringent standards that they have to meet, or does the industry itself have to police itself on those standards? What's your opinion on that?
Well, that's a tough issue because the government is simply overworked. It's the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration is so overworked and quite simply cannot get around to everything that they need to. Now, hand in hand with that is the fact that most of the standards that the automakers have to pass were drafted by the automakers themselves. And so it stands to reason that, obviously they're going to propose a standard that they already know they can pass with minimal effort. And so the standards have to be higher. Automakers have to be held to more account. And it's going to require a real sea change within the industry for that to happen. You look to Europe, for example. The European automakers, Volvo is the first one that comes to mind for a culture of safety. And Volvo has committed to, by the year 2020, the concept that no one will be seriously injured or killed driving a new Volvo. That is a huge commitment to safety, and one that I don't see American automakers first of all ever stepping up and making that commitment. And certainly with the culture that they have today, they could not live up to that commitment if they were able to make it.
You're talking about the culture of the American automakers. Do you find that these industries are hiding these facts and these issues from the consumers?
Absolutely.
And if so, why?
We see it every day. Well, it's solely in the name of profit, more sales. Automakers know that they run tests that reveal failure modes and just quite simply hide that information. One example is the GM ignition cases that are ongoing now, which we have a number of. GM knew about that defect for over 10 years before it ever came to light through the Brooke Melton case in Georgia. And as a result of that litigation, millions of cars worldwide have now been recalled. Volkswagen, this week, this is the Detroit Auto Show week in which the automakers release their new design. And NHTSA has taken the position, and the government, that Volkswagen has hidden from the American public the fact that its diesel cars cannot meet the EPA standards, the air quality standards, emission regulations. And, they've had a number of executives, the president, the company CEO, all step down. People have been fired. But interestingly, here's Volkswagen's position this week. They said, look, we didn't lie. Our procedures just were not compatible with American law. Now, that's a real slick and fancy way of saying what we did was illegal. But
you're right.
The way they phrase it is that what we did just wasn't compatible with your laws. Well, this is the country in which they're trying to sell products, and so they have to comply with the safety regulations and laws that we have. And so, to answer your question, absolutely, automakers hide information from the American public in furtherance of selling more vehicles.
Well, Mike, I don't want to get too political here, but obviously a lot of what these companies do, obviously, is hire lobbyists to push their policies into Congress to have them pass laws that will either lower standards or protect them from maybe some higher standards. How do you feel about that, about the whole political process of money in politics and how it affects companies and industries like the auto industry from maybe doing the right thing?
Well, I think as long as you have a political system, you're going to have people who want to have their say. And I think companies, just like individuals, have the right to be able to express their opinion and try to push their agenda. The bigger issue here, though, is that public safety is far too important to be left up to politics. Public safety is a driving force that has to be above and beyond the pettiness of politics, the pull and sway. You should not have a situation in which cars are safer under one administration than another. You shouldn't have a situation in which automakers are freer to get away with safety defects under one political landscape as opposed to the next. Safety has to be an issue that overrides politics. It has to be something that is so important that the political landscape doesn't affect.
Very well said, Mike. And since we're in an election season right now, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Well, let's take a quick break right now, but be back in a minute right here on Ringler Radio with my co-host, Keith Christie, and our special guest, Mike Andrews. We'll be right back.
This is Ringler Radio from Ringler Associates, the leader in the structured settlements profession nationwide. Did you know that Ringler is involved in a third of all structured settlement cases in the country? Ringler Associates works with all the parties in a lawsuit settlement to find the best possible financial solution for the people involved. There's a Ringler Associate in all the major cities in the U.S. No one has more experience than a Ringler Associate. Check out our new website at www.ringlerassociates.com for the best information for claimants, legal professionals, and claims personnel, and to find the Ringler Associate nearest you. When it's your interest at stake in a lawsuit settlement, you want only the best financial plan. You can count on Ringler Associates to structure a customized plan that meets the needs of you and your family for the future. Visit ringlerassociates.com to learn more.
Welcome back to Ringler Radio. Glad you could join us. I'm joined today by my co-host, Keith Christie, and our special guest, attorney Mike Andrews from the Beasley Allen law firm in Montgomery, Alabama. Well, Mike, in cases like these, like the one we talked about earlier, the injured person is not the only one impacted. Ms. Bullock has a young daughter and a husband. And in your experience, how do many of these injuries affect the families?
Yeah, the injuries to the individual themselves is really the tip of the iceberg. This not only did this severely affect her husband, who has to step up and become both the mother and the father, but it affects her daughter, her young daughter, who was actually in the crash. Thankfully, she was not injured, but she was there, and she has to go through the emotional and mental trauma. But there are grandparents involved, and they step up and move into the home to try to help the family heal. And injuries of this type, this severe, last for years. And so this is not a situation in which, she's out of the hospital and things return to normal. They're now dealing with what is their new normal and how that affects the rest of the family. And it certainly extends to all of the members in the family.
You're correct about that, Mike. You really are. And talking about structured settlements, and Mrs. Bullock is permanently disabled from this accident, how does a structured settlement benefit her and her family, short-term and long-term?
Structured settlements can be very useful and definitely very important, particularly in cases involving catastrophic injuries, for a number of reasons. One, it causes the person to have money set aside that is going to be there for the future, for the long term. In the short term, the person frequently is dealing with trying to adjust to this new normal and their physical needs and therapy and doctor's appointments. So maybe they don't have the time or the mental capacity to deal with financial arrangements. And so it can take that burden away from the person and set up a financial vehicle that is there that will just continue to operate. The other thing, like I said, is that you know, these injuries frequently last for years. As we age, someone who has been injured frequently will develop more injuries later that are related to that. For example, early onset of arthritis. And if you've had a replacement knee, a replacement hip, replacement ankle, then you're going to have a certain interval at which those have to be replaced yet again. And so if someone has a cash payout and unfortunately goes through that money, buys everything they've ever wanted, it might be great for a short time, but then later they don't have the money set aside for those medical treatments. And so a structured settlement can definitely be very beneficial and helpful in catastrophic injury cases.
Well, that's good to hear you say that, and I think we all agree with you very, very, very much. What's your message, Mike, to those folks who've been injured by a defective vehicle? What's the next step they should take if they feel that they've been subjected to some of the problems that you mentioned earlier?
Well, the big issue is a consumer generally doesn't know if the injury is a result of a defect. They just know that they were in a wreck or some sort of accident and they've been catastrophically injured, but they can't put their finger on what it might have been about the vehicle. And this case was a good example. You know, being an ordinary consumer, Ms. Bullock knew that something was wrong. Her car accelerated out of her control. But not being an engineer, not being an accident reconstructionist, not being a turbocharger person, she didn't know exactly what or how that defect could have contributed to her crash. So someone who has been in an accident, someone who has been catastrophically injured, needs to seek investigation from an experienced lawyer, someone who's seen this before. I've always said that if I had to have serious surgery, I want a surgeon who has done 3 or 4 of those same surgeries that day. Someone that comes in the room and has just seen what he's about to do for me. And the same applies in the world of attorneys. You want someone who sees catastrophic injury cases, someone who's familiar with the injury issues, but also with the defect issues, and who can look at the accident, who can look at the product, and can help you understand how it happened, what defect may exist, and how the company certainly could and should have designed it in such a way that this would not have happened.
Well, that's good advice. Good advice.
Well, Mike, let me ask you, and circling back to what Larry just said, you know, what would be your message to the car industry or the auto manufacturing industry regarding the handling of these cases? I mean, if you were an advocate for the plaintiff talking to the car manufacturers, what would you say to them?
Well, you know, we do that every day. We talk to car manufacturers in deposition, and what I would say to them is that safety is the most important issue in the product that you're producing. You're producing a product that can affect people who don't even purchase your product. Someone driving down the road in another manufacturer's automobile can be struck by a GM car with a defective ignition. And so it's important to understand that safety is the primary overriding issue in automobile manufacturing. It has to be. Even as we move into operator-assisted and autonomous driving vehicles, that those vehicles propose to take the driver out of the loop of fault and put it solely on the car, and that's fine. But the car structure itself still has to be safe. It still has to perform properly in a reasonable crash. And for goodness sake, if you know an issue exists in your car, don't hide that. Get it out in the open immediately so that no other people can be needlessly injured and killed.
Well, Mike, you just mentioned driverless cars. I think that we can all say that and assume that we're going to be seeing litigation in the future on the cases you're talking about in today's environment, but certainly in that new environment that's out there as we move forward through time. I assume you agree with that litigation is not going to stop. I think these problems are probably just going to be persistent through time because of either manufacturers' desire to cut costs or maybe just design elements in how they're trying to make these cars. So I'd say that litigation is not dead as we move forward. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely not. And unfortunately, people will continue to be injured and killed in automobile crashes. And some of those crashes are going to be the result of defects in products. Just because a computer is now driving or helping to drive the car doesn't mean that it is worry-free. Have you ever had a computer that never crashed? I haven't. And so you have to think, well, that's going to carry over to the automobile industry too. But again, in those cases, even assume for a second that the computer doesn't do anything wrong, that someone else driving their car hits you. Your car still has to be manufactured to perform in such a way that you're made safe, or as safe as you can be given the magnitude of the crash. Everyone knows that crashes are going to happen. That's why automakers have to run crash tests. And so the car has to be manufactured in such a way that you're protected when that crash does happen.
Well, Mike, it's important that the public also have competent, tremendous attorneys, litigation attorneys that are going to help them when they get into these predicaments, and coupled with great representation and hopefully certain elements that might help, such as structured settlements. Hopefully you bring, and also all of us bring some solace to some of these folks who have suffered in these incidents. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Mike, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, talk to you about this or any other subject, how would they do that?
One of the easiest ways to reach me around the clock is really email, and that's mike.andrews@BeasleyAllen.com. You can go to our website, which is BeasleyAllen.com, and locate us through the various pages, or you can call me at 800-898-2034.
Terrific. And Keith, if someone wanted to talk to you, how would they do that?
The easiest way to do that would be via my cell phone, 504-616-6263, or via email at kchristie@ringlerassociates.com.
Terrific. And if any of you out there want to contact any of the Ringler Associates around the country, ringlerassociates.com is the website. It's a terrific website. It's got a lot of great information. And, of course, you can reach any of us out there on that website. You can even see our pictures, Keith. I think they're on the website there. That's interesting, isn't it?
They are.
And the other thing I wanted to mention to you is that when you go on our website, ringlerassociates.com, you can see all the Ringler Radio shows that have been done. We've done hundreds of the shows over time. You can also reach those shows on ringlerradio.com, legaltalknetwork.com, or you can go to iTunes and download it and listen at your leisure. You can hear Mike Andrews and us discuss this whole concept of defective automobiles. And with that, Mike, I want to thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, again, thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak today.
Terrific. And Keith, thanks for being a great co-host.
I appreciate it very much, gentlemen, and hope to see both of you soon.
Terrific. And with that, I'll just say to all the rest of you out there, just go have a great day. Bye-bye.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. Thanks for listening to Ringler Radio. With over 1 million listeners, Ringler Associates, the first name in structured settlements. Visit ringlerassociates.com today.